Live tonight from the Harbourfront Theatre in Summerside, this is the 2015 CBC Provincial Leaders Debates. It's a boisterous group. Thank you, folks. Thank you and welcome. A near-capacity house here at the Harbourfront Theatre in Summerside. Good evening on television, on radio, also online. I'm Bruce Rainey, your host and moderator for tonight. We're looking forward to a great evening, 1 week away from Islanders going to the polls. And this is the first of two televised leaders debate this week. We're so happy to have the airtime on CBC tonight, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We're going 90 minutes live with no commercials at all. The way it's going to work tonight, there's just a couple of rules that we'll go through off the top, and then we'll get right to this. I'm hoping tonight to be like a boxing referee in a good fight, and that's basically stay out of the way and let these men control the night, obviously, the agenda. The only time I'll get involved, we're encouraging spirit from you, obviously. Nothing too raucous, but spirit. And from the leaders, the only time I'll jump in is when they perhaps veer off topic or get capital C chippy as opposed to small c chippy. The way it has worked, we asked the audience, our viewing audience, for questions, and we received close to 200. What we had to do, and I apologize off the top because there's a chance if you're watching tonight, your question, just because of sheer volume, might not get asked. But what we tried to do is break them down into two categories. One topics that have been discussed really since day one of this election campaign, and number two are topics that really haven't been yet and might be fun to hear tonight on stage live. And so what you'll hear tonight are a combination of the two. In terms of most answers tonight, they will be 1 minute in length. And here's how the leaders will know when they're approaching 1 minute. We have Laurie Main down front. Laurie's great with the stopwatch. When they get to 50 seconds, she's going to hit that light. And they know from that point on, the light will stay on for 10 seconds. When that goes off, if a leader is still talking, I will have to jump in and politely move things along for the night. The way it's going to start tonight, we'll start with an opening statement that will be 1 minute in length, after which we'll get to questions that have been posed by you. These podium positions, as you can attest if you were watching Compass or were here in the theatre, they were drawn for at random. So we begin tonight with an opening statement from Liberal leader Wade McLaughlin.
Good evening, Bruce, and thank you to CBC for organizing this debate. Greetings and best wishes to my fellow party leaders. Welcome to audience members here at the Harbourfront Theatre and those who are viewing by tuning in. I've appreciated the opportunity over the past several months to meet Islanders in all walks of life and all parts of our province. This has been truly inspirational and energizing. Leadership and good government must start with listening and learning. It is upon this foundation that good government, good policies and priorities and strategies and teams are built. I have a deep love for this province. I believe in Prince Edward Island, and I'm proud of our people. We are optimistic by nature. We know that we have challenges, and we know that we have tremendous opportunities for success when we work together. We have made much progress, and our collective goal must be to make P.E.I. even better. That is my commitment to each of you. Let's work together. Thank you. I look forward to this debate.
Next opening statement courtesy of Green Party leader Peter Bevan Baker.
Islanders want just a couple of very simple and very reasonable things from their politicians. We want good, honest government from good, honest people. That's it. It's as simple as that. But I would suggest to you that that would actually be something quite new and different on Prince Edward Island. And you don't get something new and different by voting for more of the same. It takes courage to stand for a third party. And I am asking Islanders to match the bravery of all the great, bright, capable Green candidates who are running across this province, to summon your courage and to vote for something new and different, something better. Because if you want real change, if you want good, honest people giving you good, honest government, then you must be brave and be bold, and on May the 4th, vote Green.
Mr. Bevan Baker, thank you very much. Opening statement now, courtesy of PC leader Rob Wentz.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to those of you at home. You've heard me talk a lot over the last few weeks about accountability, and you'll hear me talk a lot more about it if you choose me for your premier. And more importantly, you'll get a government that will work to make the lives better of all Prince Edward Islanders. I have a deep pride in the people of Prince Edward Island and a real faith that we can work together to make things better for all Prince Edward Islanders, for our children and for their children. To do that, we have to change the political culture. People need to know that their future depends on their hard work and talent, not who they know. A fresh coat of paint on an old and tired government is not going to do that. I offer a new direction. We'll get to the bottom of the PNP and the e-gaming and how it became a provincial embarrassment. We'll balance the budget, and we'll cut your electricity bill by 9%. And we'll create jobs by giving confidence to the public, to the private sector.
Mr. Lance, I got to jump in there. Thank you very much. And the final of our 4 opening statements, courtesy of NDP leader Michael Redmond.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for everybody for coming this evening. And I'd be remiss, Bruce, if I didn't mention the fact that when I took this debate, I had put in one request to you, and that was to have the Prophet as the moderator, and that didn't happen, so I'm somewhat disappointed, but we're happy to have you. Fellow Islanders, I'm Mike Redmond. The reason why I got into politics was very simple. I wanted to make a difference. I want this island to be a better place for my family and for yours. I want our kids to grow up with hope in their future and pride in the place they come from. We live in a beautiful place. We are hardworking, generous people. We look after one another. Unfortunately, thank you. Unfortunately, our government has let us down and not projected these values. Now, some folks will tell you you have no choice during this election. You do have a choice. It's time to put the focus back on your family. I'm on your side. My NDP team is on your side. We're ready to go. Together, let's make this a better place for our kids.
All right, Mr. Redmond, thank you. You wasted 15 seconds on the fiddler, but he'll be happy at least anyway. We move now to our debate questions. They were sent in by our audience members. Leaders have not seen them. And again, we tried to pick some that were representative of topics or issues that have been prevalent from day one of the campaign, and also some others. We're going to have mostly questions that require a 1-minute answer and then moderated debate after. We will also tonight throw in a few of what we call short snappers, ones that clearly have shorter answers, and we'll ask 30 seconds for those. This is a 1-minute answer question. Mr. Bevan Baker, you'll be first up for this. It's kind of a warm-up question, I think, for the 4 of you tonight. What do you see as the role of government in the lives of Islanders?
I said in my opening statement that I think Islanders are looking for just a couple of simple things from their politicians, and that's integrity and competence. And I think that has been a rare thing. I'm speaking specifically about the last couple of administrations. I think we've had wonderful governments here on Prince Edward Island. When I look back at Angus MacLean, and Alec Campbell, I think of administrations that were full of people with integrity who had the best interests of all Islanders at heart. And I think that's the sort of government that Islanders want. But somehow we have lost our way. And we have now reached a situation where the role of government seems to be to look after their friends rather than to look after all Islanders. They're more concerned with looking after the most connected rather than the most vulnerable and the most needy, and we have to change that.
Mr. Bevan Baker, thank you, sir. Mr. Lance, you have 1 minute. What do you see as the role of government in the lives of Islanders?
Well, thank you, Bruce. Obviously, the role of government is to deliver core services that people expect at Prince Edward Island. And I would agree with Peter that the people of Prince Edward Island expect honest, transparent, open government. They need to trust that government is governing in the best interests of all Prince Edward Islanders. Sometimes government leaders have to stand up and tell Prince Edward Islanders what they can and cannot do for them. We need to focus our priorities on those core services. But we have to give people the confidence that we are governing for the greater good, and that it is not about who you know, but government is there to govern for everyone in Prince Edward Island. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lance, thank you. Mr. Redmond, the question, what do you see as the role of government in the lives of Islanders?
Well, I think Mr. Lance has touched on it. Essential services, healthcare, education, infrastructure. But we need government to play a role in innovation. When there's great ideas, we need government to be behind those ideas, to help foster a wonderful economy at P.E.I. We need, quite simply, though, Bruce, to put an end to politicians picking the winners and the losers. That has to end. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, the question, what do you see as the role of government in the lives of Islanders?
I said, Bruce, in my opening statement, that the first job of government is to listen and learn, and from there to develop and articulate policies, strategies, and priorities. Of course, to provide services, health, education, human services, infrastructure. And in addition to that, to show leadership in the economy and in the democratic process. And in my own case, I'm prepared to offer leadership that is different from previous Conservative and Liberal administrations, and to offer leadership and experience that is going to make a difference for this province.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to the point here where we ask for some moderated debate. And I will simply ask, did any of you hear anything in the aforementioned that stuck with you or you want to follow up on? Hand in the air and I'll bring you in. Yes.
The reason I am not running for one of the two big parties is because, by the way, I have utmost respect for Rob and Wade. I think they're fine gentlemen. I've got to know them fairly well over the last couple of months. But I have to tell you that they work for a couple of toxic organizations. And I think no matter the integrity or the quality of their leadership, I think that's going to be compromised because of the people who are beside and behind them, always telling them what they have to think, what they have to say, and how they have to vote. And that's not the kind of politics we want on Prince Edward Island. As your representative, as a Green MLA, I would never be beholden to a backroom. I am there to represent my constituents, to represent their will, and it's just a whole different thing. So when Wade says, I will offer you new leadership, that may be true in reality, but I think it may be difficult to actually change the machine which he is
I saw Mr. McLaughlin's hand first, okay? So Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Redmond.
And let me say I'm proud of my organization. We had almost 10,000 people at nominating conventions from one end of this province to the other. We had 1,500 people here a week ago Friday in Summerside at a great rally. It was probably more like 2,200 if you counted them properly. And there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy, and honest democratic support for what we need to do to improve this province.
Bruce, the stark reality on Prince Edward Island is we have politics out of fear. And Mr. McLaughlin's touching on those issues, but you can look no further than our health care, our education, our infrastructure. We built a highway, $25 million that nobody needed, right? And now that man's the chief of staff. We need a government that's going to be focused on people first and pay attention to issues like poverty, on social housing. These are critical. We have too many people in this province living in poverty, and a government's ignoring the signs.
I can only assume that Mr. Lance might want to jump in.
Well, I'll just say, Mr. McLaughlin, that I don't think any political party on Prince Edward Island is going to take lessons about counting properly from the Liberals. Islanders will judge me on my performance. My slogan, A New Direction, means something to me. I got into politics to make change. As a father of 2 children, I want them to be able to live a prosperous and meaningful life here on Prince Edward Island. We can only do that by changing the political culture. I've made all my candidates sign an accountability pledge. And unfortunately, I had to take action on someone who didn't uphold that pledge already. That is how I am running my campaign. That's how I'll continue to govern this province after May 4th.
In the interest of time, and because there was some balance there, let us move on to question number 2, okay? This goes, I believe, first to Mr. Lance in the order. Mr. Lance, what will you do to help address what has been called an epidemic in Island high schools, and that is the rampant abuse of prescription drugs?
It's a very difficult issue, Bruce. It's one that was brought forward to us many times as municipal leaders when I was on Charlottetown City Council. We have to start controlling how prescriptions are delivered in Prince Edward Island. There has to be more control over dangerous drugs and how they make their way to the street. There was unfortunately, we felt that we had to put police officers in our school, and that's just an extremely unfortunate situation. We're trying to deal with the problem at the wrong end. We need preventative measures to keep children away from these dangerous drugs. We need programs to get children off of these dangerous drugs, and this is entirely an issue of mental health and addictions where this government has failed us over the last 8 years.
And I should point out the red light is back in play for these 1-minute answers. Mr. Redmond.
Well, very simple. Let's look historically at what's happened. The Tories, they closed all the facilities in P.E.I. The Liberals, they threw away the keys. Right? 3 words, Bruce. Education, education, education.
We must have found the keys. There's a new 12-bed facility operating just across the way here in Summerside. And we've announced as part of our platform that there'll be a further 12-bed facility in Charlottetown. Let me speak about how I think we really need to approach this. It's not through policing or through some enforcement in the schools. It's to really, as a community, work together to support our youth. One of the greatest places I visited in my travels over the last while was the Reach Foundation, a group of parents and community people working with young people who have been in trouble because of drugs. And another place, and maybe the most important or the most impactful visit I made, was to the Methadone Treatment Center in Charlottetown. They have 250 people between 16 and 24 mainly who are getting successfully treated there. And in fact, we don't currently have at the Mount Herbert facility anyone who is there because of drug addictions. It's all alcohol addiction. So we're making headway, and we have to be thinking concretely and collaboratively.
Mr. McLaughlin, I have to jump in there. The red light has gone off. Thank you, sir. Before we get to debate on this topic, a final comment and answer, 1 minute from Mr. Bevan Baker.
What we have to do is offer our youth hope. We have to provide for them a vision of a future in which they can live out their lives here on Prince Edward Island, where they can reach their potential as human beings, and where they will have opportunities for good jobs to raise their families and be happy here. When you have no hope, when you're feeling helpless, when you are in pain, that is when you reach for things like painkillers. And we have a very scattered, uncoordinated approach to mental health and addictions here on Prince Edward Island. We need an acute service which is there 24/7, not just for youth, but for anybody who is in a mental health crisis. And we also need a coordinated, long-term, integrated program so that people can get well, so that they can stay well, they can remain well in their communities. So removing the hopelessness, providing hope for Islanders is the real solution to this problem.
Again, I would ask if any of you would like to follow up.
Well, Bruce,
I saw Mr. Redmond first, actually, so we'll go 1 and then 2.
Well, first of all, the REACH program is a wonderful program, and Mr. McLaughlin is 100% right. But it's orchestrated by parents. They took the lead on the program. They're the ones that stepped to the plate, not government. Right? Another perfect example, Bruce, is our jails. We have about 80% mental health and addictions issues in our jails. We have no case management structure. So we're putting people in jails who have an addictions or a mental health issue, and then we're putting them right back into society exactly where they came from. We need a really concentrated effort on how we're going to make people better and how we're going to improve society in Prince Edward Island.
Mr. Lance, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Bruce. Mike has made some of my points, but, you know, I've sat in a room with a mother who's just distraught about what to do with her daughter that is addicted to prescription drugs, and she was fighting to get her daughter into Mount Herbert. So I find it hard to believe that there's nobody there at Mount Herbert with prescription drug problems when there are people dying to get in. But it is a scattered and unfocused approach that we take, and we have to understand that this is a social issue. My brother, who is a judge right here in Summerside, has stood up and said this quite loudly and clearly. Our justice system is not the place to be dealing with youth who have addiction problems.
It's true that the Reach Foundation was started by parents, but in fact, the government has supported it. But I want to agree with Peter Bevan-Baker that the real large picture here is about hope and about development, so that there are opportunities for the families and for the young people, that they can see that they've got a future. And that's what we're really committed to, is the development and growth of the province in a way that our young people will choose to stay here.
Mr. Bevan-Baker, you're the only.
All addictions are an attempt to escape reality. If we can create a reality for youth here on Prince Edward Island that is hopeful, that provides them with the idea that they could find a well-paying year-round job, that they could raise their families here, not have to fracture families and send husbands or wives out west to support their families. That's the real long-term way of dealing with this. I'm not suggesting there are easy answers to that, but I do think that will really solve this problem at its core.
Okay, we will leave that topic right there with a comment from Mr. Bevan-Baker. Mr. Redmond, back to the red light for the answer to this question. P.E.I. has 27 MLAs for a population of 140,000. Ontario is a province with 13.6 million people, and it has 107 MLAs. By the P.E.I. proportion, it would have near 700. The question, will you commit to a process that would see fewer MLAs in the legislature?
This is a fantastic question. Absolutely. For 3 years, I've said we have too many MLAs. We could get down to 15. Imagine a world in which we had MLAs, red, green, blue, of course, orange, working together, collaborating, cooperating. If I was the Premier of this province and Mr. Bevan-Baker had the opportunity to be my Environment Minister, I would take him in a heartbeat, because that's how a good functioning government works. Tough to get this all in. We're overpaying our MLAs, too much severance pay, too much pensions. How on earth can we have a province where it takes 30 years as a civil servant to earn a pension, it takes a Canadian military veteran 25, and it takes an MLA 5? Yeah.
We'll reset the red light for Mr. McLaughlin.
After this election and before the next one, it's required by the Elections Act that there be a redrawing of the boundaries. And I've said that as we proceed to redraw those boundaries, we should first have a full-force commission on electoral, I'll call it reform, and that we would, in the process, consider questions such as the number of MLAs, the boundaries, ways in which we might invigorate the democratic process, and including questions of compensation and remuneration of MLAs. So the short answer to your question, Bruce, is yes, and I look forward to that, and I would see that taking place in the first 24 months of a mandate, so that we could proceed then to the drawing of the boundaries and the gearing up for an election. I might point out on the question of the red, green, blue, and orange that I'm wearing my family tartan, which has all 4 colors.
Mr. Bevan-Baker, will you commit to a process that would see fewer MLAs in the legislature?
No. And let me explain that. Obviously, there's quite a widespread and deep disenchantment with our politicians. I've expressed that myself this evening. But I think we have to be careful about what we do with that disillusionment, with that anger. If you want to run a proper legislative branch, executive branch in your government, it needs to be a certain size. We already have multiple ministries folded into one, environment, labor, and justice, for example, things that don't really fit together. The problem, if we're thinking about let's get rid of all those MLAs and save money, they represent the tiniest percentage of the provincial budget. The big place where we can save money in the civil service is to reduce its size. 70% of the provincial budget goes to support our civil service. And I'm not saying that you go in there and slash and burn and do it thoughtlessly, but a government that came in with a plan, a government with 27 MLAs to properly represent the people.
We have to jump in. Thank you, sir. Mr. Lance, the question, will you commit to a process that would see fewer MLAs in the legislature?
Well, I am willing to consider the idea that we do have too many politicians. I'm working to get rid of some of the Liberals right now, but just because we're a smaller province, Bruce, doesn't mean we have fewer problems. And there is a price to being a full partner in Confederation, a full province. And my thinking is more in line with Peter's, that we need to have that critical mass. We don't realize the same economies of scale as perhaps they do in Ontario. Certainly 27 MLAs in Ontario would be far too few. But we need a critical mass to run all the essential services we have here. But again, the electoral boundaries process is the time for us to consider that. I think that there is room for perhaps a small number of fewer MLAs, but it needs to be examined very carefully because we need to continue to represent the people of Prince Edward Island properly.
You were all pretty thorough there. Do you want to, Mr. Bevan Baker is first that wants, yeah.
We have a conundrum here on Prince Edward Island in that, as Rob just said, we are a sovereign province within the country of Canada with some responsibilities and by the way, some wonderful opportunities because of that. But we are also an island with a population of 140,000 people. So balancing those two things, yes, if you look purely at the number of people here and divide that into the legislature, we are overrepresented. But if we want to be a truly functioning province within the country of Canada, then we have to have a certain size of legislature.
Mr. Redmond.
Well, first of all, we should never be scared of opening up the Constitution. But let me further our conversation here. Too many MLAs, too many MPs, far too many senators, although we're working, we got rid of them last night with the Habs. Thank you. And you know what? We should, as a province, always protect our public service, okay? Protect those good unionized, good paying jobs.
As we consider this question and related questions, and in particular as we go on into that comprehensive thinking about electoral reform, we must always start with the idea of the gift of jurisdiction, absolutely. As Canada's smallest province, we have a lot of advantages and we have ways in which we can collaborate with others in Confederation and in fact do a very able job of managing or leveraging those relationships to our advantage. So we don't want to go downsizing or changing to the point where we lose the capacity to work effectively and to take advantage of that gift of jurisdiction.
Mr. Lance?
Well, Mike said it here as well, but some would argue we have too many MPs. I think many would argue that we have far too many municipal councils. It's becoming difficult to find people to serve on municipal councils in Prince Edward Island. I think local governance reform is an important issue on Prince Edward Island. It needs to be looked at very carefully, and I'm willing to examine the same issues provincially with our number of MLAs, but we've all made some very good points here why we need to move cautiously in reducing that number of MLAs. People in Prince Edward Island take great pride in being able to call their MLAs, to see them on the street every day. It's part of our political culture here. The problem is our representation and making each and every one of those 27 MLAs earn their salary.
We will leave it there. Our next question and this is again a 1-minute answer. We'll do a short snapper after this, but this is a 1-minute answer plus debate to follow. I believe it's Mr. McLaughlin. In what single area are we most lacking when it comes to health care? Part A. What would you do to address this? Part B, in 1 minute.
We unveiled a comprehensive program of health initiatives, and the one I'll speak about is in the whole area of drug coverage. This has been an issue for Prince Edward Islanders, a pocketbook issue, and an issue that is also about their health, because if they're not filling their prescriptions and taking them regularly, it turns into larger issues for the healthcare system as well as for the individuals. So we've introduced a generic drug program, first of its kind in Canada, where the cost of generic drugs will be capped for Prince Edward Islanders who don't have drug coverage presently or currently, and that's 1/3 of the total population of the province. So they will be able to have their generic prescriptions filled, except for narcotics or for prescriptions that are otherwise covered by a drug plan. And that will mean that these people will be in better health and taking their prescriptions. And in fact, we've been told that in particular for people who have mental health issues, that they're much more likely to take their prescriptions with this program.
Mr. Bevan Baker, in what single area are we most lacking when it comes to health care? What would you do to address this?
Very difficult to draw it back to one single thing, Bruce, because there's so many things that could be improved in our healthcare system. But I think if I were to do that, it would be that we need more frontline workers. We have excessive wait times. We have inaccessible care. We have people who are waiting far too long for acute problems. And the only way we can solve that is by hiring more frontline workers, more nurses, more nurse practitioners, more doctors, and more diagnosticians. But also married to that, we have to make sure that we have the facilities, and we have to make sure that we have all of the equipment that those people can use. There's no point in having all these people if the equipment is not there. There's no point in having all this equipment if we don't have the right people to use it. And that's a real problem, this disintegration of our medical system. So we need more workers, we need more frontline workers, and it needs to be done in a coordinated way with the equipment and the facilities that exist here and need to be augmented.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lance, the single area we are most lacking in when it comes to health care, what you would do.
Thanks, Bruce. I'll come back to the Liberals' generic drug plan later, but I'll actually answer your question. First of all, I'd like to say that something has to be done about the state of health care in Prince County. For far too long, the government has ignored this part of the province. We need stable funding for the health center in Tignish. We need to know what is the future of the palliative care beds at Alberton Hospital. And speaking of Alberton Hospital, there are far too many people in long-term care in the hospital where they don't belong. That's a problem across our entire province. But let me say, we have to expand our home care model. We have people staying far too long in hospital after operations like total knee surgery and hip surgery. They're there 3 or 4 times longer than other provincial averages because our home care model doesn't allow for physiotherapists and occupational therapists, which are given as inpatient programs at the hospital when they could be done far more reasonably and efficiently at home.
I've got to jump in there. Thank you, Mr. Lance. Mr. Redmond.
Well, first of all, Bruce, let's talk about Stephen Harper, right? Because we don't have enough dollars in our healthcare system. We haven't had a premier of this province stand up to Mr. Harper and say, fulfill your commitments to our province. Our people need healthcare dollars today. That's the first thing. We need a governance model, engagement. I went across the aisle on 7 meetings. Communities want to be engaged in the healthcare discussions, they want involvement, and they want to help the process move forward. This is also a government that pays no attention to the social determinants of health, housing, income, food. We need a government that's focused on the people. Thank you.
I open the floor to anybody who would like to follow up on anything he heard.
Well, let me just say on the transfer payments, look, transfer payments from Ottawa have continued to increase, but the problem here, we cannot complain about this while we continue to throw money out the window in the form of interest payments on our enormous debt. We've been running debts continuously for 8 years, 3rd largest expenditure in the provincial budget behind health and education, so we can't complain about that. But let me go back to the Liberals' generic drug plan. It's a random choice of program with no sense in medical need or financial need. Many of the generic drugs, there are many brand drugs that don't have generic alternatives, like asthma, blood pressure, diabetes drugs, thyroid drugs. So what's to happen for someone who's spending $150 a month on their child's asthma treatment? This program does absolutely nothing for them. Our drug program is far more fair and focused. It focuses on seniors, and we're reducing the copay on seniors' drug plan by 20%.
Mr. Lance, let me jump in there because there was a point in there directed to Mr. McLaughlin, I believe. I know you want to get into. Mr. McLaughlin first.
Well, let me say about the generic drug program, it does speak to the 1/3 of islanders who don't currently have a program, and saying that you're going to lower the seniors' drugs costs doesn't speak to those folks at all. And we brought in a seniors' drug plan, and there's currently a payment of just under $16 for each prescription. But I want to pick up on two other points. One is about the transfer payments, which I think is absolutely to the center of this discussion. There was a headline this week about $12 million additional transfer payments. The denominator there is $544 million. So the increase is just under 0.5%. It's more like 0.3%. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's to deal with the areas that are our largest expenditures, which are health and education and human services. So that's why the province of Prince Edward Island struggles to meet all of the needs in a timely way, and we've done a lot to expand and increase and have extra services, including on this generic drug plan. There are 1,000 generic drugs, more than 1,000 generic drugs on the formulary that these people will have access to under the P.E.I. generic drug plan.
Mr. McLaughlin, let me get in because I know the topic of transfer payments caught your eye.
Well, of course it did. It has, because it lapsed in last year, and Mr. Harper has left the Atlantic provinces, and we know how he feels about the Maritimes and Atlantic Canadians. He doesn't have any respect for us. So I would say, Mr. Lance, give your boss a call in Ottawa and ask him to pay attention to what he's given Islanders here today. The other thing I will say is this. We changed the first payer on medical insurance for retirees. It's had a dramatic effect, doubling healthcare costs for people who are already on a fixed income. This was a cost-saving measure by the last finance minister, Mr. Sheridan. It is absolutely deplorable to try to balance the books on the back of retirees.
Final comment on this particular topic.
One of the limitations of a forum such as this is that when a complicated topic like healthcare comes up and you're asked to deal with it, either to bring out your #1 issue or within a minute to try and give some sort of cohesive answer, it's almost impossible. And I just wanted to not leave this subject without saying that, as in health itself, there are acute problems in our healthcare system and chronic problems in our healthcare system. And the acute problems, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that we have a lack of facilities and a lack of frontline workers. The chronic problem in our health system, and Mike alluded to this, is that we fail to recognize that economic, social, and environmental factors are profoundly affect our health. And we have to move away from a reactive healthcare system which deals with illness when it arises, towards a system which is proactive and promotes wellness and prevents disease from happening.
Mr. Bevan Baker, thank you. Gentlemen, adjust your mental clocks now to 30 seconds as we engage in the first of what will be 2 or 3 short snappers tonight. And this one cuts to the core of really why we're here today. Mr. Bevan Baker, I believe you're next. What makes you the best qualified of these 4 to be Premier of P.E.I.? In 30 seconds, sir. Well, we'll start the clock, by the way, on your first word, okay? So you can allow applause to go right ahead. Yep.
Well, I wouldn't want to assume that I am. I can tell you what qualities I do have. I lead by example. I know I am able to inspire people, but I'm also very aware of my limitations. I know when I have to seek help, when I have to seek counsel, whether that's from an expert or whether it's from the general population. I absolutely believe in the genius of the collective will. And as an MLA for District 17, I will be going to my constituents to seek their input on every decision I make.
Mr. Lance, why are you the best of these four to be Premier of P.E.I.?
Well, Bruce, I'm the only one on stage here who's been elected to any level of government. I spent 8 years as a city councillor. I spent 20 years in the private sector solving problems, and that is exactly what this province needs, is someone to solve problems. Now, one of my best qualities is a listener. You'll often find me being very quiet in a room full of people who are talking, because I listen, I consult, and then I make decisions. I'm my own man, Bruce. I will work within the confines of government and make decisions for the good of Prince Edward
Got to cut you
Island.
there, Mr. Lance. Thank you. Short snappers aren't easy in 30 seconds. Mike Redmond, you're next to try it. Why are you the best of these four?
Well, the most important thing, Bruce, about leadership is being able to attract the best people. Good leaders have good people around them. We don't micromanage. We ensure that people have a voice. We ensure that we look at the critical issues through important lens. Aboriginal issues, people with disabilities. I've attracted those people to my team, the NDP team. We're the only party that has that diversity in our team.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Bruce, I bring leadership and experience, including having been elected to a local council. And but above all, I think people have told me that I don't need the job. So, and I think that actually is a point to make. I'm not in this to build a political career or to stay around to get the pension. I'm in here to make a difference, and I'm.
We will continue along, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Back to the longer form questions with answers. There have been a lot of numbers thrown around, especially in the last week. I believe we're to Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance, tonight, as of tonight, how much will your campaign promises cost to implement? And where do you expect to get that money when our province has a debt in the billions of dollars?
Well, Bruce, we made all of those figures available to the public. I believe the final figure, the net cost of implementing our program, operating and capital, is about $17.8 million. Now, the largest expenditure in that platform is real tax relief for the people of Prince Edward Island in the form of a 9% reduction in your electricity bills. Now, we chose that deliberately because the Liberal government ran last time around with a promise not to implement the HST. So this is only based on fairness, that we give some measure of relief from that decision of this Liberal government to go back on their word and implement the HST on Prince Edward Island. Bruce, we have a $1.6 billion budget in this province. Through more careful spending and better growth of our economy, we can balance the budget in 2 years.
Mr. Lance, thank you. Mr. Redmond, how much does your list of promises cost? How do you do it?
Well, you would have seen yesterday, Bruce, that we released not only what we were going to spend, but how we were going to pay for those promises. We are the only party who stood up here today and has both a spending and how we're going to save, okay, and make sure that we can spend those dollars wisely. Mr. Lance talks about promises. He promised big basic income guarantee. It's not in his platform. There must be a cost associated with it. He promised 1 million trees to be planted. Unless this is the Lorax, those trees cost money to plant, okay? So we need to look at ways the government operates in terms of loans, procurement, and overall government operations. We have to be fiscally responsible with people's money. That's what the NDP is going to do.
Do you want to give me your number? You didn't give me your number.
30 million.
30 million?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McLaughlin.
Our number is 30 million too, Bruce. It's 20 million in net new operating costs and 10 million in new capital costs. And of that number, 80% of it is in health, education, and human services. And as far as how we'll pay for it, that's 1.25% of the total spending of the province annually, between 1.6 and 1.7 billion. So through the proper management of the resources that are available to us and setting up the priorities that are reflected in this platform, it's possible to move toward a balanced budget and to manage our affairs and to look after the priorities and the most important needs of Prince Edward Islanders.
Mr. Bevan Baker, how much do your promises cost? How do you pay for them?
$29.9 million. I'm being facetious, but
A little.
throwing out numbers as we are here on the stage, you have to realize that they're inherently inaccurate and unsupportable. Partly because we're guessing, and partly because a lot of the things that affect the cost of any program that we may be suggesting today are outside of our control. Interest rates, federal transfers, the global economy, all kinds of things which have a profound effect on the sorts of projections that we make. We have no control over. What I want to say, though, in terms of the Green Party platform, is that some of our initiatives have upfront costs. But because the Green Party is always thinking long-term, I consider them to be investments. And for example, in healthcare, if we were to invest in preventative measures, it will save the province in the long term.
I have to get it. Yep, thank you, sir. You've all heard what each had to say. Does anybody want to follow up? Mr. Redmond.
I'll just respond first, Bruce,
yes,
because I want to respond to Mike's accusation about the trees.
We'll get to Mr. Redmond. Yes.
Mike, please go.
After you.
No, please, you're up. You're up. I'm still a gentleman. Go ahead.
Well, it's about the trees, Mike. I got to get.
Isn't it always?
Yeah. Well, listen. The trees have been costed, and I'd like to remind Prince Edward Islanders that I operated a company that planted 2 million trees in Prince Edward Island. I personally, before I started that company, I planted 150,000 trees with my bare hands in Prince Edward Island. I know exactly what it costs to plant trees, and it's been costed in our platform. And on the basic income guarantee, that was not a platform policy in our campaign document. That was a commitment to examine a pilot project, a 5-year pilot project for the basic income guarantee. That's why it doesn't show up in our platform, Mike. But it's something we're willing to examine, but we all know it requires the cooperation of our federal partners.
We got to let Mr. Redmond go now, obviously.
Thank you very much for that. Unless you're getting volunteers to plant those trees, but we won't go there anymore, I promise. One of the things we talked about readily was having a fiscal accountability office to oversee government affairs, independent of politicians, to ensure that public tax dollars are being spent effectively and respectfully. Peter mentioned, too, about platform planks that invested. We've committed to investing in our children, feed our kids, ensure our seniors are staying at home. Those are real investments into the public, but also create jobs. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin?
To expand with 2 points with respect to our platform and its costing. First, we have what I would call the most modest program that's been put forward for fiscal responsibility, for reasons of fiscal responsibility in many elections in this province. And if you go through area by area, you'll see that we have selected what are the areas where we can make the most difference and set priorities, but do it responsibly. The second thing is to say that there are attached to a number of these initiatives savings that can be reasonably expected, such as from the generic drug plan, or the money that might in fact come through as government revenues as a result of our tax credit to seniors and others. But we haven't counted that. We're simply counting the out-of-pocket new cost.
Mr. Bevan Baker with a final thought, and then we'll move on.
One of the things which is a struggle for people up here and all of you in the audience and at home is that we have lost the trust of each other. And for politicians to win back the trust of the electorate, for you to have faith once again in the people who put themselves forward to lead you, we have to be honest with you. And all too often, leaders will make promises and not keep them. You know that. You have seen it every time. They are even prone to, in pre-election talk, in campaigns, saying they will not do something and then implement it. I'm thinking, of course, of the HST here. So as long as politicians continue to behave in that manner, we will never win back the trust of the electorate, and it will be always a difficult situation. So I think honesty is absolutely the best policy.
Let's wrap up that topic right there. I'm going to do a little reset here for you now, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just tuning in, this is the 2015 CBC Provincial Leaders Debate on CBC TV, on radio, and online. We are asking questions tonight that came from you, and we tried to divide them into two categories. One were topics that were prevalent throughout the duration of this campaign, and secondly, we've tried to find a few that hopefully will encourage newer discussion here tonight. Plus, we've had a few of what we called short snappers, and those have been tough. 30 seconds to answer, not easy. Leaders are doing a great job. Would you agree it's not easy up here? I'm going to refresh your water, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Let you take a sip and get ready. And as we do, we'll go back to another short snapper. We're looking for a 30-second answer. I spoke last week to the executive director of the P.E.I. division of the Canadian Cancer Society, who told me that if she had one question she could ask you all tonight, it would be this: will you follow Nova Scotia's lead and ban flavored tobacco? Mr. Redmond, we have come to you.
30 seconds?
Yes.
Yes. Not only that, though, Bruce, not only that, we would look at other ways to make sure that we don't increase cancers on P.E.I. We would ban cosmetic pesticides. Right? We would look at an opportunity at graduated smoking, so when kids get older and older, to make sure that our kids aren't smoking. These are good opportunities for us to pay attention to our youth and remove cigarettes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redmond. Mr. McLaughlin from the P.E.I. division of the Canadian Cancer Society. Will you follow Nova Scotia's lead and ban flavored tobacco?
Yes. And we'll continue to work with the Cancer Society and other community partners to promote smoking cessation and to promote kids to not start smoking in the first place.
Flavored tobacco, Mr. Bevan Baker.
Yes, we would. And I met with Jane Farquharson and Bill Whalen a few weeks ago, at which time they outlined the 5 things that they would like to see any new administration take care of in terms of cancer prevention on P.E.I. And I wrote back to them saying, if elected, absolutely a Green Party would, and that was one of them, by the way, was flavored cigarettes. Cosmetic pesticides was one of the other ones. And a Green Party would uphold all of their requests.
Sir? Mr. Lance, flavored tobacco.
The answer is yes, Bruce. And these tobaccos, with the flavors they come in, it's blatantly obvious to anyone that they're just an insidious way to get children hooked on nicotine. And, you know, we are committed to, obviously, all the parties here have met with the Cancer Society, and we're committed to all of the 5 priorities that the Cancer Society has in Prince Edward Island.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. The next question is a longer form. Back to a minute, Laurie, okay? Our editorial panel, when we saw this one come through, we thought we would include it just to see what happened. Here it is. You gentlemen have spent countless hours together over the past month at various forums and debates. What is one policy, incentive, or campaign promise you've heard from an opposing leader that you most identify with and think would be wise for government to adopt? Mr. McLaughlin.
Let me select the Farmland Trust initiative that's in the Green Platform and that is recommended by Horace Carver in his commission on land ownership, which allows for government to pick up farm properties and then lease them out in smaller parcels to farmers who are getting started in the business. So that's something that, and we've generally said that we intend to move forward on the recommendations of the Carver report. So that's one that we would adopt.
So, Mr. Bevan Baker, the pressure's that you can't say nothing now because, so you got to pick something.
Well, I mean, there were so many. But before I do that, let me say that it actually has been a pleasure to share the stage and various seats and forums with the other three gentlemen on the stage. And it's been an entirely cordial and civil time. I mean, I know of course, we've barbed at each other tonight, and I understand that, but there's never been any nastiness. It's never turned that way, and that's been it's something that I really appreciate from all three of them.
You're going to have to pick something quickly, though. I'm worried about your life.
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Mike's many of the NDP suggestions I love. I can't pick one. There are too many, and perhaps just before the red light takes me out here, I would absolutely welcome a new attitude in government that is collaborative and cooperative and works together.
Mr. Lance, something you've heard from an opposing leader that has resonated strongly with you.
I guess Peter didn't have a lot of time to think about this, but I was hoping that, based on his last remark about collaboration between parties, that he might pick my idea to allow third and fourth parties to sit on legislative committees so that we can have a broader spectrum of political voices around the table. But what I would like to choose is something that only the PC Party and the Green Party have in common, and that is we are the only two parties to advance the idea of implementing whistleblower legislation on Prince Edward Island. We have the most comprehensive accountability platform of all four parties on this stage, and it is a signature issue of this campaign for our party, because we know we have to reestablish trust with the public.
Thank you, Mr. Lance.
Well, Bruce, if Rob wants a seat at the table for the Greens and NDP, proportional representation works. But the one thing that I do like, and again, I've spent a lot of time with these guys, far too much to be quite honest with you, but it has been a wonderful experience for me, and I've gotten to know all of them over the last 3 weeks. But the thing that really caught my eye was they all spoke about basic income guarantee. So they've realized that people are living below the poverty line in Prince Edward Island. Collectively, we can work together. Collaboratively, we can work together to bring people up out of poverty.
Thank you, Mr. Redden. Anybody want to jump in on that topic?
Sure. Perhaps I had trouble in finding one particular example. And by the way, it would not be Rob's, and with no disrespect, Rob, we will get to the Legislative Assembly all by ourselves. Thank you very much. So.
Mr. McLaughlin, we'll let Mr. McLaughlin come in.
I'm going to pick up on the point about and bringing in whistleblower, I'll say regime, because I believe it can be done through policy, and it's best done that way, working collaboratively with the public service. In most of the jurisdictions across Canada where legislation has been brought in, there's been very little actually done in terms of whistleblowing activity. So I think we have to work in a way that is very collaborative and cooperative and professional with our public service, so that they will feel that they can in fact report to their superiors, and that we will in fact encourage whistleblowing.
Mr. Lance, just wait. Mr. Redmond.
Sorry, Rob again.
Got to return the favor here.
I know. So I will say that Rob did bring up the other day when we were on the radio, he brought up about social housing, affordable housing. Critical. There's far too many people living below the poverty line without proper housing. So I was really, really happy when he brought that up the other day, because there is opportunity. And Mr. McLaughlin's 100% right. If we have the proper legislation, then we'll have proper governance. Right now, we do not have proper legislation. We're not protecting the public interest. Thank you.
Final comment.
Well, who can argue with whistleblower legislation? My only question, Mr. McLaughlin, is what are you afraid of?
In the interest of a direct question to another leader, I'll allow a final comment from Mr.
Not
McLaughlin.
you. Let me answer that question. I'm not afraid of anything, but I think when you identify something that you want to do, you look at how it can most effectively come about. And what I've said is, I think, and I do believe that we can, with the systems that we have in a professional public service, implement a policy, set in place processes, and have whistleblowing in place without needing to go to the legislature. So that's simply a question of whether you do it by policy or by legislation. There's no question of being afraid of anything.
Thank you, gentlemen. Short snapper, 30 seconds or less. I believe it's Mr. Bevan Baker, correct? Yeah. If elected Premier, will you bother commit to a fixed election date?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was talking earlier about not having faith in governments. You know, one of the few things that I think the Giz administration did, which I would be entirely supportive of, was the notion of bringing in legislation for fixed election dates. Here we are. It ain't October.
Yes, Bruce, this is entirely about being honest and transparent with the people of Prince Edward Island. The notion of the fixed election date was primarily so that the party in power could not jury-rig the election process to its advantage. And I would argue that that's exactly what's happened in this case. This government has attempted to catch us all flat-footed so that they could steal another 4 years of power for themselves, knowing full well that the people of this province have lost confidence and faith.
We'll cut right there. We'll cut right there.
I forgot it was a snapper, sorry.
Yeah, it was a snapper. It wasn't, yeah.
Go. Okay, so yes, we are obviously in favor of fixed election dates. One of the things that's been missed about this election, we're here without a budget. Okay, the second thing we're missing about this election is we want to involve as many voices, ideas. When you don't have a fixed election date, you leave a lot of women out of the question. And thank you. Gender plays such a critical role in elections that we need to make sure that the election date is obeyed and that women, as well as diversity in our groups, have an opportunity to engage the political process.
Thank you, Mr. Redmond. Mr. McLaughlin.
On the particular question of whether it's time to have an election, I think Islanders agree it's time to have an election. In fact, 15% of them voted at the advance poll on Saturday. We have four party leaders without a seat in the House. We've got a federal election coming in October, so it's all done within the within the Elections Act that the Lieutenant Governor can dissolve the legislature. On the particular question, that's something that I would refer to this Elections Commission that would sit after an election to look broadly at questions of electoral reform.
Because there was disparity in opinion there, do you want to follow that up, gentlemen, with any further questions or debate?
Well, Bruce, Islanders may be enthusiastic now that we've been thrust into this process, and I would point out that the numbers at the advanced polls are not always favorable for the party in power.
All I'll say is this, Bruce, is, and I think Peter's touched on it, people have lost confidence in government. They've lost confidence in how we govern on P.E.I. Fixed election dates are important. But obviously here we stand, and these gentlemen are all walking the same streets I am, in the mud. People are not very happy at the doors, and we need to make sure that we provide change and opportunity going forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next. This is back to a longer form question, and this is a topic that has been prevalent since the very early days of this election call. Mr. Lance, I believe you're next. P.E.I. is the only province in the country that does not offer women access to abortions in their own province. In their own province. What, if anything, will you do to change that?
Well, Bruce, there is no answer that's going to make everyone happy on this issue, unfortunately, and we know we have a responsibility to follow the 5 principles of the Canada Health Act in delivering health care services to our citizens both on and off the island here, and we'll continue to monitor whether our current policy conforms with the Act, and in the meantime, any changes to abortion policy are not on the agenda of the PC party.
Mr. Redmond.
Well, very quickly, first of all, it is protected by the Canadian Health Act, and we're not doing justice to women in P.E.I. It's choice. It's about choice. And the fact of the matter is, the two old parties are dissolving themselves from responsibility. They don't have the courage to stand up and represent island women. We do.
Mr. McLaughlin, I'll restate the question for anybody just tuning in. P.E.I. is the only province in the country that does not offer women access to abortions in their own province. What, if anything, will you do to change that?
The real issue on access, abortion is a legal medical procedure available under the Canada Health Act, but the real issue is about where the barriers are, and we identify three. One is timely and accessible information about the availability of abortion services. Two is about some of the preliminaries that are in place, and it's something that I think warrants some serious investigation and discussion as to how that could be improved. And the third is the out-of-pocket cost for traveling out of province to have the abortion. And I think those are really the issues that the government should be addressing, and our government will address in full consultation with the community after an election.
Mr. Bevan Baker.
The Green Party will establish a women's sexual and reproductive health care clinic on Prince Edward Island. There is no party up here that is going to prevent abortions. That is not going to happen. What we have here are two parties who are going to make it such that there are barriers in the way and discrimination, particularly against low-income women. And there are two parties here who do not believe that that is the way to go. And I also have to say that this clinic, unfortunately, because we end up always talking about abortion, we forget all of the other women's health needs that are out there. Infertility, postpartum depression, a whole host of services specifically related to women's reproductive health, which we never discuss. And of course, that would be part of the health clinic.
Thank you, Mr. Bevan Baker. The floor is open, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bruce. The one thing that these guys have dissolved themselves from responsibility is accessibility and safety. We had lost a child at Mount Albion. That young lady who chose either the choice to have a child or to have an abortion had no choices. We weren't there to help her, and that's a shame. And one of the things that we have to talk about is the fact that we need education, right? Peter's touched on a very important issue. Our Women's Health Center does a lot of that. We also talked about infertility. Midwifery is also important. Aging women who have health issues. We need to make sure that we offer full-on services for everyone. And the other part is, it's cost-effective. Thank you.
Anybody else want the floor?
I'd like to say one thing, Bruce. Rob mentioned at the very beginning of his answer, there is no answer that's going to make everybody happy. Of course. Governments are not here to make everybody happy. Governments are here to do the right thing. That's what governments are for.
Do we end it there, this topic? We do. We continue along. I believe Mr. McLaughlin is next to get the question. Is that right? I've lost track. I apologize. Rob, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Boomer.
Well done. I'm glad we're on first name basis.
That was good. Mr. Redmond, a longer form question. What industry presents the best opportunity for future job growth and development in the province? What industry?
Well, I think if you look at our farming, our fishers, our berry producers, our apple orchard, we gave you an opportunity. We've given the government an opportunity to look at an issue that's very, very serious, and that's feeding our children. 5,000 children in this province live in poverty. Shameful statistic, right? And the government has to bear the brunt of those decisions. But we can turn that negative into positive. We can channel that energy into making sure that every child in this province goes to school fed. Breakfast and lunch. It is, however, a very, very big ticket item. It is a major investment, but it's an investment into our children. Is that not the best investment we can ever make, is investing into our children? And the other part of that, Bruce, is we're going to create jobs. We're going to help our farmers, our fishers, our berry producers, our apple orchards, and create nutrition jobs. Is that our better plan? There is none. Thank you.
Mr. Redmond, thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, the industry that presents the best opportunity for future job growth and development in the province.
I'll give you a two-part answer, Bruce. First, our primary industries. Food is our biggest export, and it's really the backbone of the P.E.I. economy. So farming, fishing, and related cuisine and so on. The second is our knowledge industries, and we've had tremendous growth in aerospace and bioscience and in information technology and communications. And then a fourth one that we've identified to grow in marine technology. And there are tremendous jobs that people have. Probably, if you totaled up those four sectors, it would be on the order of 3,000 good jobs in Prince Edward Island for people who are younger with professional credentials, who are in many cases in rural communities, who are starting families and contributing to their communities. And I think that's really a great sign of some of the success that we're having with our economic development policies in this province.
Yes, sir.
The answer is agriculture. We have a tremendous opportunity to transition our agriculture from trying to compete in a global commodities market, high quantity, low value, where we're at a serious competitive disadvantage, partly because of our size and partly because of our geographical location. There are single farms in Idaho that produce more potatoes than the whole of Prince Edward Island. How can we ever hope to compete and be successful in that sort of marketplace? But there's a huge opportunity to transition agriculture on Prince Edward Island to be more job intensive, which is what the question was about. How can we create jobs to produce healthy food that is known to be sustainably produced, because the market for that is growing exponentially around the world. So we produce good quality food, we provide jobs for farmers, and they get a proper return on their hard work. The poor farmers here are not making a living. They work the hardest.
Mr. Bevan Baker, the light is off. I appreciate that. Mr. Lance.
Well, it's true that we will continue to create jobs through many of the traditional sectors here on Prince Edward Island. Of course we will. We have bioscience, aerospace, information technology, which have been growing for a decade or two in Prince Edward Island. And we know that those will continue to grow, and we will nurture them. But I believe that the number one area where we're going to create the most growth in Prince Edward Island is through entrepreneurship. We need to start fostering that culture of entrepreneurship, the self-starters, the risk-takers. So we can't put our finger on what sector will continue to create growth in jobs in Prince Edward Island, because by its very nature, entrepreneurs may never know what their final destination may be, but I know that it will be in food and agriculture, or in bioscience, or in IT, or in manufacturing. But we need to start encouraging that private sector-led economy and encouraging our youth to be self-starters and risk-takers, to create their own jobs.
The floor is yours, gentlemen.
I'm getting to the front of the podium here quick, so I appreciate it. Mr. McLaughlin has touched on a very important issue, knowledge. How do kids learn if they don't eat? That's a very simple question. How do kids learn if they don't eat? How do we know that people that rely on social services, those families that need the critical dollars, your social services minister left $5 million on the table. Left those most vulnerable in our society in poverty. It's a disgrace. And quite frankly, Mr. McLaughlin, I would hope that we could work together and resolve this issue and make sure that we lift those people who are most vulnerable out of poverty. Thank you.
I'd be happy to work in a collaborative way on this very question, and we've brought forward a program with a number of very significant commitments to do more in the whole area of human services, including in the breakfast and lunch programs in the schools, but right across the board in supporting families and supporting people who are in situations where they can move ahead in society. And that's one of the reasons, in fact, that wasn't perhaps explained as fully as it might, that we have people who've been in the social services client system who now are moved to employment, and that's part of the ultimate success story of that whole system. But we have to keep working on that, and in fact, I think we're at a time in terms of our total workforce when we can, in fact, do that. But let me then, if I may, go back to this question of how we grow. I think I just want to agree with Rob Lance on this, that we need to, of course, emphasize entrepreneurship, and to say if we don't have startups, we're not going to have growth. So we need to really promote, and we have in our program various ways in which we will promote that for young people and for people who want to start mid-career, or for that matter, people who are getting along further, who want to start something and grow it here in Prince Edward Island.
Let's jump in right there. A final thought to Mr. Bevan Baker, and then we'll tally our time here.
I'd just like to expand on what I started to say, which is the program that the Green Party has put forward, the plan to transition agriculture from where we are now to something more productive, more sustainable, more healthy. And that involves something that Wade touched on earlier, the Island Farmland Trust, the idea that he likes, because the biggest barrier to new farmers is the cost of land. And if an Island Farmland Trust money used by public money used to buy land, to keep it in farm production, is one of those things. But there are 4 other things we need to do. We need a new homesteaders plan. We need more farms, and we need more farmers to revitalize our rural communities. So those are 2 of the things. We need a local food security act, so there is a market for the new products that we produce. We need to develop an island brand. We can't just call ourselves the food island and carry on doing what we're doing. We need to develop an island brand which screams purity, health, and food that is sustainably produced. And then we need a provincial government that will aggressively market that island brand. If we do all of those things, we can once again have a successful, productive, profitable agricultural industry on P.E.I.
Thank you, Mr. Bevan Baker. Gentlemen, we have 14 minutes left, and we have to hit the top of the clock exactly, because at CBC you can't mess with hockey. Okay? So we've got 14 minutes left. My math tells me I've got to leave you about 5 minutes for closing statements, so perhaps start getting in that frame of mind. I think we have time for another short snapper, though, starting with Mr. McLaughlin. If elected, what would you do to pressure the Government of Canada to stop its plan to eliminate door-to-door mail delivery?
We've signed the petitions, and we've been doing the advocacy. I'm afraid that's very, very far down the path now. It's to be implemented by October, is it not? So I actually, to tell you the truth, Bruce, I don't know what more we could do. Maybe we could stop using the mails. I say that facetiously. I don't know what can be done to change that policy at this stage in time.
Mr. Bevan Baker.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I do want to say that it's shameful in a country as wealthy as Canada that we can't deliver the mail to our senior citizens. Honestly, we have to set, as governments, we have to set priorities. And I'm not here to bash the federal government, because all governments set wrong priorities, but surely that's one that we need to take care of.
Mr. Lance, sir.
Yes, Bruce, and it does, I'll go back to, I think it was your very first question on what government should do for the people of Prince Edward Island. Well, the federal government, it would seem, a core service is the delivery of mail. For me, personally, it does not impact me. I rarely check my mailbox. I operate very electronically, but I know this is a huge issue for the seniors of our... It is an important issue for the seniors of our province, and as a member of City Council, I signed a petition. I advocated on behalf of overturning this decision.
We got to get out. Thank you, Mr. Lance. Mr. Redmond?
Well, first of all, let's make this very clear. You can elect New Democrats. That's how we can push back. I have Scott Goodette in the audience tonight, Chris Clay, Canada Post workers. Canada Post workers that have fought every single day against Harper's cuts. Rob's boss. We'll leave it at that. Anyway. Let's also talk about the important role that postal workers play. I know we're cutting it short. There was a time we were all connected by the railway. Postal workers were checking in on people with disabilities, on seniors. Okay,
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Okay. I think we have time for one more longer form, short debate, and then to the closing statement. Mr. Bevan Baker, I believe you are next. And here it is. Our final long-form question of the night will be, what will your party do to ensure that all Islanders have access to post-secondary education at a reasonable cost?
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to point out that the Green Party is the only one of the four parties in front of you who has actually developed and published a full platform. We did that over a month ago. And included in that, of course, is a large section on education. And because I can't remember exactly what our post-secondary points are, I'm going to read them to you now. We would make all provincial student loans interest-free, as was successfully done in Nova Scotia under an NDP government, I might say. We would develop a program whereby university or college graduates could have their student loans forgiven if they chose to work for a set period in a community service job in return for minimum stipend. We would extend the grace period of a further 6 months from graduation to 1 year before repayment of student loans begins. And finally, a Green Party would provide stable funding for post-secondary education. That's the real kicker right there.
Mr. Lance, to reiterate the question, what will your party do to ensure that all Islanders have access to post-secondary education at a reasonable cost?
Well, Bruce, we do have a community services bursary program here in Prince Edward Island, and as part of our platform, we've committed to doubling the amount available from $500 to $1,000 for students who volunteer 100 hours in their communities. So we've also committed to increasing the George Coles bursary from $2,200 to $5,000 as an incentive for post-secondary students to stay right here on Prince Edward Island. And I, too, would commit to stable funding for the University of Prince Edward Island.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. Mr. Redmond.
The easy answer, Bruce, is to say that we would cap tuition. But before we start giving the university or any post-secondary institutions more money on top of more money, we have to have an assessment of value for money. We have a university, the only one in Canada, that is exempt from freedom of information legislation. Once we know exactly how Islanders' taxpayers' dollars are being spent, then obviously we would look at a sustainable, predictable funding model. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McLaughlin.
Bruce, there is in place an elaborate or multi-part bursary and grant system for university and college students at the moment. The George Coles bursaries, the Completion Awards, the Island Skills Island Students Awards, roughly $7 million a year. And our view is that the issue is more on the completion end than on getting students into university or into college. So what we've proposed, much along the lines of what Peter mentioned, is to look at the loans or the student loan system, to extend the repayment after graduation, to look at the role of, or the consideration of family income and income earned while studying in the eligibility for student loans. And we have committed to multi-year funding for the post-secondary institutions. And I might say that these programs together are succeeding. We have gone in this province from having 37% of our workforce, if I may just one sentence.
We're out.
37%, just 37% to 48%.
Well, we'll cut you there, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you, sir. I think we have time for debate.
Maybe I'll just...
Yeah.
What I was reading the point was that we have gone in a short space of time from having 37% of our workforce with post-secondary credentials to 48%, which is really a very impressive achievement, and it shows what we can do.
Mr. Baker?
One of the problems, of course, with accessibility to post-secondary education is the cost. And at the moment, Prince Edward Island's University and Holland College lie outside FOIP, We don't know how they spend their money.
Yeah.
We don't know whether the millions of dollars that flow in there, public funds, are spent efficiently and effectively. So one thing that we would do as a Green government is to bring Prince Edward Island University and also Holland College under P.E.I legislation, so we could look at the books and see how money was spent.
Mr. Lance, if you want in, sir.
Well, the PC party is also committed to bring the university and all post-secondary education institutions under FOIP, as well as municipalities. But I guess the key word I heard in Mr. McLaughlin's description was elaborate. And I think what we need to do, first and foremost, is simplify the process for students, both the application process and the repayment of loans. You know, it can be a difficult, as with any government bureaucracy, it can be difficult to navigate and to, particularly for students, the first time borrowing large sums of money. So I think simplification, it is that red tape question. We need a one-stop shop where people can borrow, repay, and understand the terms.
I'm going to jump in there, Mr. Lance. We have to get to closing statements, Mr. Redmond, okay? To make sure we hit time, it's time.
Getting in?
No.
I'm out?
No, you're first with closing statements, okay? We're going to hold you to a minute. Mr. Redmond, your closing statement for tonight.
Well, first of all, Bruce, thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. And I would like to say thank you to Wade and Peter and Rob for sharing the podium with me, if you would. And thank you to you for coming tonight. You have choices this election for the first time in a long time. There's a stark reality between the blue-red team, the orange team, and the green team. Our P.E.I., it's broken. The NDP will fix it. The P.E.I. legislature needs fresh, new voices. We need new Democrats. We will put the priority where it firmly belongs: your family, youth, seniors, on hard-working Islanders. Listen, guys, together we can do this. Thank you.
Mr. Redmond, thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Lance, a minute for your closing statement.
Sure, Bruce. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming here tonight. Thank you to my fellow leaders here. This election is about trust, it's about integrity, and it's about accountability. And over the last 8 years, I've felt my own trust in the current government all but disappear, and I don't think I'm alone in this. It's clear to me that things need to change, and change must begin with a new political culture in Prince Edward Island, a culture based on integrity and openness and fairness for all Islanders, not just those who know the right people. And so this is really what this election is all about, because it's not just a promise that I'm making to you, but a promise that I've made to my wife and my children, and it's a promise that I've made to myself, a promise that when the time comes to step aside, I'll be able to look each and every one of you in the eye and myself in the mirror and say that under my watch, integrity and accountability and openness and the common good were the principles that directed our every action. I ask for your support on May 4th. Thank you very much.
Closing statement now from Peter Bevan Baker.
We have so many traditions here on Prince Edward Island, some of them lovely, some of them not so much. Politically, we have a tradition that when the electorate gets fed up with the red team, they vote the blue team in, and then they get fed up with the blue team and they vote the red team in. And consequently, we've had many decades of poison ping-pong politics here on Prince Edward Island. Now, I know that many of you are sick of red. I know that you feel you can't take it anymore. And I get that, because to some extent I feel the same. However, we have another island tradition about what to do when you've had enough of red. When Anne Shirley couldn't take red anymore, did she dye her hair blue? No, she went green. So if you are fed up with red, don't make like your parents and grandparents.
I got to jump in,
Make
Mr.
like
Bevan
Aunt
Baker.
Shirley and go green.
Thank you, sir. Closing statement from Liberal leader Wade McLaughlin.
Thank you, Bruce, and fellow leaders. By the way, she went back to red, Peter. Fellow Islanders, 1 week from today, you will decide who will lead this province for the next 4 years. And this is an important historic decision. I offer you my leadership and my experience as a committed Islander. We know that we have challenges. We also have opportunities. We have much to be thankful for and to be proud of. I believe in P.E.I, and I want to work with each of you to make Prince Edward Island an even better place. I want to work with you to grow our economy and create jobs. I want to work with you to create more opportunity for young Islanders to stay here and to come home. I want to work with you to improve our health care and education systems. And I want to provide assistance and service to Islanders who are facing challenges. And to be positive and optimistic ambassadors as we put Prince Edward Island on the map. I'm asking you to join me in working to make P.E.I. a better place. On May 4th, I ask for your support. Let's work together. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. To you at home as well, we appreciate you watching, listening, or checking in with us online. That's our 2015 Leaders Debate here on CBC. Drive carefully if you're here. Vote on May 4th. Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.